There is something deeply cruel about the open ocean. It stretches in every direction as far as the human eye can see. It holds more water than any other place on this planet, over 1.335 billion cubic kilometers of it. And yet, if you are stranded on it without supplies, it will kill you with thirst before almost anything else does. This was not a hypothetical problem in 1941. It was happening every single week. As the Second World War tore through the Pacific, American pilots were being shot down over open water with alarming regularity. Some survived the crash landings. Their aircraft hit the surface, broke apart, and these men managed to pull themselves into life rafts. They were alive. They were floating. And they were completely surrounded by water they could not drink. Ocean water contains roughly 35 grams of salt per liter, about 3.5% salinity. The human kidney can only produce urine with a salt concentration of around 2%. That means that to process the salt in a single liter of seawater, your body must expel more water than you consumed in the first place. Drinking salt water does not hydrate you. It accelerates dehydration. It pulls water out of your cells, your bloodstream, your organs. A man adrift on the ocean, surrounded by billions of liters of water, dies of thirst because every drop around him is actively trying to kill him. The United States military understood this problem well by 1941. They had already lost pilots to dehydration in the Pacific. The wounds were survivable, the sharks were avoidable, the cold could be managed, but thirst, slow, inevitable, irreversible thirst, was killing men who had survived every other danger the ocean threw at them. The solution they needed had to meet very specific requirements. It had to be small enough to fit in a standard life raft survival kit. It had to be lightweight, since pilots carried only what they could. It had to work without electricity, without batteries, without any external power source. It had to require no technical knowledge to operate, and it had to turn the most abundant thing in a downed pilot's environment, seawater, into something drinkable. The U.S. military turned this problem over to science, and science, as it so often does, found the answer not in something complex or new, but in something ancient, elegant, and almost embarrassingly simple. Part 2. The Sun Queen of MIT. Maria Telkes was born in Budapest, Hungary, in 1900. From an early age, she was drawn to physics and chemistry with an intensity that set her apart from most of her contemporaries. She earned her doctorate in physical chemistry in 1924 from the University of Budapest, and by the time she was 30, she had already published serious research on the conversion of solar energy into usable power. In 1939, she joined the research staff at MIT. Her colleagues there, a group of serious, accomplished scientists, gave her a nickname that was equal parts affectionate and respectful. They called her the Sun Queen, because Maria Telkes had, by that point, devoted much of her intellectual life to a single obsession, understanding what the sun could do and finding ways to make it do more of it. When the U.S. government came to MIT with the problem of seawater desalination for downed pilots, Telkes was the obvious choice to lead the research. Her mission was precisely defined: design a device that could turn deadly ocean water into safe drinking water using nothing but sunlight. The device had to be small enough to inflate and carry in a standard life raft kit. It had to be operable by a disoriented, possibly injured, certainly terrified pilot with no scientific training whatsoever. What she designed was, in its physical form, almost humble. An inflatable plastic balloon-like device. You poured seawater into it. Sunlight passed through the transparent plastic exterior and heated the water inside. The water evaporated, rising upward as vapor and leaving every dissolved contaminant behind. The salt, the minerals, the bacteria, everything. That vapor then rose until it hit the cooler upper surface of the device. The temperature differential caused it to condense back into liquid droplets, which then ran down the interior surface and collected in a tube at the bottom. From that tube, clean, pure, drinkable water. One small device, 1 full liter of fresh water produced every single day. No batteries, no filters, no chemicals, no moving parts, no technical knowledge required. Enough water to keep one person alive indefinitely on the open ocean. The Office of Scientific Research and Development ordered 100,000 units. Maria Telkes had done exactly what she was asked to do. Her device worked. The science was not theoretical. It was tested, validated, and proven effective in her laboratory at MIT. Seawater containing 30,000 parts per million of dissolved salt was reduced to barely 1 part per million after passing through her solar still. That is 99.9% purification, not by filtering, not by chemical treatment, but by transforming water from one physical state to another and back again, leaving every contaminant behind in the process. And then, inexplicably, nothing happened. MIT delayed production. Manufacturers were switched. Arguments arose over specifications and materials. The process stalled, was restarted, and stalled again. Month after month of 1944 and 1945 passed, and not a single unit shipped. The pilots, who needed them, continued to die of dehydration in life rafts. And in August of 1945, the war ended, and the 100,000 units were never delivered. Maria Telkes received a certificate of merit for her work. Her solar still eventually found its way into some military emergency kits, in limited numbers, as a survival tool of last resort. But it never became what the science clearly showed it should have become, a standard piece of equipment in every emergency kit, every survival pack, every household in the world. The question of why that happened is where this story gets genuinely uncomfortable. Part 3. The Science of the Still. Before we get to the economics and the industry, it is worth understanding exactly why the solar still works as completely as it does, because the mechanism is important, and it explains why no conventional filter can match it. The process is called solar distillation, and it is, in simplified form, the same process that creates rain. The sun heats a body of water. The water on the surface evaporates. It converts from liquid to vapor. That vapor rises until it encounters a cooler surface, at which point it condenses back into liquid droplets and falls, or drips downward. What makes this relevant to purification is what happens to contaminants during the evaporation step. When water evaporates, only water molecules make the transition to vapor. Dissolved salts, minerals, and heavy metals are ionic compounds. They do not evaporate at water's boiling point. They stay behind in the liquid. Bacteria, viruses, and biological contaminants cannot survive conversion to vapor and cannot travel as vapor. Chemicals and pesticides with sufficiently high boiling points are also left behind. What passes through as vapor and what condenses on the other side is almost exclusively pure water. This is why the laboratory results from Maria Telkes' work showed 99.9% purification from 30,000 ppm salt water. It is not because her device was especially sophisticated. It is because the underlying physics of evaporation and condensation is simply that thorough. Distillation does not filter contaminants out of water. It leaves them behind entirely while the water moves through a phase change and reconstitutes on the other side. A conventional filter works differently. A filter has pores, physical holes of a specific size. Contaminants larger than those holes get caught. Contaminants smaller than those holes pass through. This is why a filter like the Life Straw can claim to remove 99.99% of bacteria. Bacteria are large enough to catch, but cannot remove dissolved salts, heavy metals, or small chemical molecules, because those fit through the pores. Filtration is, by its nature, size selective. Distillation is not selective at all. If it cannot evaporate, it cannot cross. New Mexico State University researchers tested this extensively with homemade solar distillers built from basic household materials. Seawater at 30,000 ppm salt concentration was purified to 1 part per million, 99.9% pure, from materials that cost nothing. The University of Texas, in 2021, published research on a hydrogel-enhanced solar distillation system that increased output rates to 12 times above commercial models, producing up to 30 liters of clean water per day from a single square meter of surface area. This is not fringe science. It is not alternative or unproven. It sits in peer-reviewed journals, has been validated by major research institutions, and has been known to work in principle for over 2,000 years. The solar still is not a modern invention. Its principles have been understood and applied across human history in ways that most people have never been taught. The basic concept of solar distillation was known to ancient civilizations. Alchemists in the classical world used versions of this process. Arab scientists in the medieval period documented distillation techniques using the sun. The knowledge was not hidden. It was simply widespread and unglamorous, the kind of practical knowledge that gets passed down in communities that need it, rather than celebrated in histories that favor the dramatic. But the most striking early large-scale application was in the Atacama Desert of northern Chile in 1872. A solar distillation plant was constructed there to supply fresh water to a mining town. It was not a small experiment. The installation covered 4,700 square meters, roughly the size of a city block. It used nothing but sunlight and the physics of evaporation and condensation to produce 22,100 liters of fresh water every single day. No electricity, no chemicals, no replacement parts, no fuel of any kind. Just sun and glass and the movement of water between physical states. That plant operated continuously for 40 years. Think about what that means. A water purification system that produced enough clean water to supply a full mining community ran for 4 consecutive decades, without requiring fuel, without requiring ongoing purchases of any kind, and was built from materials that were available and affordable in the 1870s. It was not a prototype. It was not a demonstration. It was infrastructure, and it worked. By the time Maria Telkes was working at MIT in the 1940s, the concept she was applying was not new. What was new was the miniaturization, the insight that the same physics that powered a 4,700 square meter Chilean installation could be scaled down to something that fit in a pilot's life raft kit. The science was settled long before she picked it up. She simply found a new application for it. This matters because it means the disappearance of solar distillation from mainstream use after World War II was not a scientific event. The science did not fail. The technology did not become obsolete. Something else happened. Part 5. The Economics of Forgetting. In the years immediately following World War II, the United States economy entered a period of expansion unlike anything it had experienced before. Manufacturing capacity that had been dedicated to the war effort needed new purposes. Consumer goods became the engine of growth. The logic of the industrial economy, mass production, planned obsolescence, repeat purchasing, was applied to almost every domain of daily life. Water purification was not exempt from this. The global water purification market today is valued at approximately $35 billion per year. It is projected to reach $63 billion by the early 2030s. The companies that operate in this market, filter manufacturers, membrane producers, purification system designers, sell products built around a particular economic model. The product you buy is not the filter. The product you buy is the replacement cartridge. The product you buy is the subscription to ongoing consumption. A Brita pitcher filter lasts approximately 2 months. Then you buy another. A reverse osmosis system requires membrane replacements every 6 months to 2 years, at costs ranging from $50 to $200 per replacement. Portable camping filters like the Sawyer Mini are sold as lifetime investments, and in fairness, they do filter a remarkable volume of water. But they require replacement cartridges, and they cannot address the full range of waterborne threats that solar distillation handles automatically. The business model of the filtration industry is not a conspiracy. It is simply capitalism operating as designed. Companies exist to generate revenue. Revenue requires repeat purchasing. Repeat purchasing requires products with finite lifespans or ongoing consumable components. A solar still, by contrast, is not a product in any meaningful commercial sense. It is a technique. You cannot patent evaporation. You cannot patent condensation. You cannot patent sunlight striking water. The process that Maria Telks used in her inflatable device is the same process that has been occurring in Earth's atmosphere for 4 billion years. What you cannot patent, you cannot own. What you cannot own, you cannot sell exclusively. What you cannot sell exclusively, you cannot build a $35 billion industry around. This does not mean that filter companies actively conspired to suppress solar distillation. The more accurate and more sobering explanation is simpler. There was no financial incentive to promote it, so it was not promoted. Marketing budgets flowed toward products that generated returns. Education about free and unpatentable techniques did not. Over decades, the cumulative effect of this economic gravity was that entire generations grew up knowing how to buy a filter and not knowing how to build a still. The danger of contaminated water is real. Bacteria, protozoa, heavy metals, chemical runoff, these are genuine threats, and the fear that drives people toward purification products is entirely legitimate. But the gap between the genuine danger and the solution that the industry offers is where the economics become most visible. The danger is real. The solution the market provides is expensive, recurring, and, in many scenarios, less complete than a piece of plastic wrap in direct sunlight. The instructions for constructing a functional solar still are straightforward enough that they can be followed by anyone, regardless of technical background, using materials available in virtually any household or camping supply. You need 4 things: a large container, a smaller collection vessel, clear plastic wrap, and a small weight such as a stone. Begin by placing the collection vessel, a cup, a small jar, any watertight container, in the center of the large container. Fill the large container with the water you want to purify. This can be salt water, muddy river water, water contaminated with biological material, or any other source of non-drinkable liquid. The level of the dirty water should remain below the rim of the collection cup so the two do not mix. Stretch the clear plastic wrap tightly across the top of the large container and seal the edges as completely as possible. You want to minimize any gaps through which vapor could escape. Place the small weight, the rock or stone, in the center of the plastic, directly above the collection cup. The weight creates a depression, a gentle downward slope in the plastic that causes condensed water droplets to roll toward the center rather than running off the sides. Place the entire setup in direct sunlight and wait. The sun heats the water in the large container. Water evaporates, rising as vapor toward the plastic wrap above. The plastic is cooler than the air below it, so the vapor condenses into droplets on its underside. Those droplets follow the slope created by the weight and drip downward into the collection cup at the center. In 2 to 4 hours, under strong, direct sunlight, you will have clean, drinkable water in the collection cup. In a full day of good sun exposure, a setup with 6 square feet of surface area can produce approximately 1 liter of purified water, sometimes more depending on ambient temperature and the salinity or contamination level of the source water. Several practical refinements improve output. Lining the bottom of the large container with dark or black material, fabric, plastic, anything that absorbs heat rather than reflecting it, increases the temperature differential and speeds evaporation. Adding moisture-rich plant material such as green leaves to the water can supplement output in arid environments where even contaminated water is scarce. Running multiple stills simultaneously scales the output proportionally. 3 stills produce 3 times the water of 1. The simplicity of this system is not a limitation. It is the point. There is no component that can break, wear out, or need replacement. The plastic wrap will eventually need replacing, but plastic wrap costs almost nothing and is available everywhere. Every other part of the system is indefinitely reusable. Part 7. Maria Telkes and what she left behind. It would be a disservice to Maria Telkes to remember her only for the solar still. She spent the rest of her professional life, which extended all the way to her death in 1995 at the age of 94, pursuing the same fundamental question she had always pursued. What can the sun do and how can we use it better? In 1948, she designed and helped build the first fully solar-heated house in the United States in Dover, Massachusetts. The house used a phase-change heat storage system of her own invention to store solar energy collected during the day and release it slowly through the night. It worked. She developed solar ovens for use in developing countries, devices that used focused sunlight to cook food without fuel at a scale and cost that made them genuinely accessible to communities with limited resources. She contributed materials research to the Apollo space program, helping to develop thermal control systems for spacecraft operating in the extreme temperature environment of space, where direct sunlight and complete shadow can exist within seconds of each other. Over the course of her career, she held more than 20 patents. She was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame in 2014, nearly 2 decades after her death. What is striking about her life is its consistency. She identified a source of energy that was abundant, free, universally available, and almost entirely untapped at the beginning of the 20th century. She then spent more than half a century finding ways to use it, to heat homes, to cook food, to purify water, to keep spacecraft alive. Each problem she approached with the same question. What can the sun already do here if we simply arrange things correctly? The solar still was one answer to that question. It was not her greatest achievement, but it may be the most instructive one because it demonstrates most clearly what happens when an answer is too simple and too free to survive in an economy that requires products. Part 8. What this means now. The knowledge of solar distillation never actually disappeared. It exists in peer-reviewed research journals. It exists in the training materials of military survival programs. It exists in the documented history of the Chilean mining installation that ran for 40 years. It exists in the archived work of Maria Telkes at MIT. What disappeared was the cultural transmission of this knowledge, the process by which practical information about survival and self-sufficiency passes from one generation to the next. That transmission requires either direct teaching or widespread documentation in accessible forms. When neither of those happens, when there is no financial incentive for anyone to teach it, and no obvious market mechanism to make it visible, knowledge that was once common becomes obscure, and obscure eventually becomes forgotten. In practical terms, what this means for anyone who spends time outdoors, or who thinks seriously about emergency preparedness, or who simply wants to understand what is available to them in a crisis, is this. The most complete water purification method, currently available, requires no ongoing purchases, no replacement parts, no technical knowledge, and no external power. It is available to anyone with access to sunlight and a piece of plastic. It removes bacteria, viruses, dissolves salts, heavy metals, and chemical contaminants with greater completeness than any commercially sold portable filter, because it does not filter those things. It simply leaves them behind. A solar still will not produce water as quickly as a pump filter. In a situation where time is not a constraint, it is not a lesser tool, it is a better one. And in a situation where a commercial filter is unavailable, where you're far enough from supply chains that replacement cartridges are simply not an option, it is not just a better tool, it is the only tool that will continue working indefinitely, without requiring anything from anyone. Maria Telkes built her device for pilots dying of thirst surrounded by water they could not drink. The same physics that saved, or should have saved, those men in life rafts in the Pacific is available to anyone, anywhere, anytime there is sunlight. It was never secret. It was simply not profitable enough to remember.